Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville on the last day of summer of 2020. I want to welcome everybody to the meeting, and we acknowledge that we reside on treaty lands rich in the traditions of First Nations, and we appreciate the stewardship of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. I now invite Council and the public to join in the singing of O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, we have regrets tonight from Councillor Sanju. And Council, I'm looking for any declarations of pecuniary interest. Madam Clerk, I'm not seeing any. Council, I would like to ask you to take up a new item first tonight. And to do that, I'm going to need your cooperation on waiving the procedural bylaw. So I have a motion in support of electric vehicle production in Oakville that seeks to reinforce the initiative from the Canadian and Ontario governments announced or confirmed this morning, or I guess revealed this morning and confirmed this afternoon. And so to do that, I need a mover and seconder to that in accordance with Section 2.2 of the procedure bylaw, the rules of procedure established in Section 14.1.2 be waived to permit consideration of this motion on its introduction today. And Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Longo, thank you very much. Any objection to that motion? Madam Clerk, I see no objection, so that's carried. Council, I believe you've been given this, but I'd like to read it. There's a one-word change. Doesn't change the meaning in any way, but it's a little cosmetic thing that we were having trouble getting done earlier. So this is the motion in support of electric vehicle production in Oakville. Whereas the Ford Motor Company of Canada, its employees, and the town of Oakville have enjoyed a successful partnership that has benefited the community and the company since 1953. Whereas the Ford Motor Company of Canada continues to be a valued member of our community and our province and Canada, and directly and indirectly employs tens of thousands of Canadians. Whereas investing in new products in the auto sector, such as electric vehicles, will ensure Canada and Ontario are leaders in innovation, job creation, and in the green economy. Whereas Premier Doug Ford has called for cooperation from all levels of government, business, and labor stakeholders in order to strengthen this important sector of the economy. And whereas the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains, recently wrote in Policy Options magazine, and I quote, "More and more Canadians want electric vehicles, and automakers are prepared to make investments to shift their manufacturing accordingly. Canada now has an opportunity to invest in electrification and drive a green recovery to help achieve our climate change goals," unquote. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Oakville supports federal provincial cooperation and long-term investment in electric vehicle production and Oakville's Ford plant, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Ford Motor Company, Unifor Local 707, Unifor Canada, the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade of Ontario, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, local Halton members of Parliament and members of provincial Parliament, and be made available to the public. And I'm happy to be joined in this as a second, with a second for this motion from Councillor Lischina. Is there any discussion? May I put the vote? Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a note that Oakville is one of the highest per capita ownerships of EV vehicles in the province, and I think we practice what we preach, so this is certainly timely. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good note. To show you, well, I'll ask if there's any objection to the motion. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The resolution carries. Council, we have two more presentations before we get to the meat of the meeting. The first is the Business Improvement Area Week proclamation. Whereas this year is the 50th anniversary of Business Improvement Areas, or BIAs, the Oakville Business Improvement Area Week is an opportunity to acknowledge the work of the 3 BIAs located in the town of Oakville. Whereas the BIAs help attract business to their local communities while providing bridges between small businesses and the municipal and provincial governments, and whereas BIAs operate with a mandate to attract and market businesses and help maintain public spaces within their designated areas, and whereas the town of Oakville recognizes the contributions of businesses, organizations, and groups in helping to make Oakville the most livable town in Canada, knowing the dedication and hard work of many enrich the lives of the local community daily and make our town stronger, safer, vibrant, and healthy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Rob Burton, do hereby proclaim September 28th to October 2nd, 2020, Oakville Business Improvement Area Week in the town of Oakville. We also have a proclamation for Goodwill Amity Week. Whereas nonprofit social services are critical to the health and well-being of our community, and whereas employment services are an important means of developing work skills and connecting job seekers and employers, and whereas Goodwill, the Amity Group, a leading nonprofit, tirelessly serves in our region with a mission of changing lives and strengthening communities through the power of work, whereas last year alone they placed 853 people in employment, supported a further 3,063 people in their independent job searches, through their retail and recycling operations, kept 3.1 million pounds of goods out of landfills, and during COVID have provided more than 6,000 meals to those experiencing food insecurity. And whereas Sunday, September 27th, marks the 85th anniversary of Goodwill, the Amity Group, therefore be it resolved that I do hereby proclaim September 27th to October 3rd, Goodwill Amity Week in the town of Oakville. Thank you, everybody, for your attention to those two, I think, important announcements. We now have the confirmation of minutes of our previous council meetings as listed in the agenda, August 4th and September 8th, 2 meetings on the 4th and 1 on the 8th. Is there a mover and seconder to adopt these minutes? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Elgar, thank you. Is there any objection to the minutes? Madam Clerk, there's no objection and the minutes are adopted. Council, we now have a standing committee report from the September 15th meeting of the Budget Committee, and we are to approve the minutes of the Budget Committee. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Lischina and Councillor Adams. Any objection to the minutes? Madam Clerk, there is none. The minutes are adopted. Council, we now have several consent items. Consent items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and confidential consent item 1. Is there a mover and seconder for the consent items? Councillor Longo? Councillor Elgar? Thank you. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, I'd be pleased to move the consent items, but I would like to go into camera with regard to confidential appendix B to consent item 1 at the appropriate time, at the end of the meeting.
Okay, so you're moving consent items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and confidential 1, and we'll go into camera at the end of the meeting for your questions. Do I understand you correctly?
Absolutely.
And Councillor Longo is seconding that? Okay, any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and the motion carries. So that brings us to our first discussion item, and that is the Lakeshore Road Reconstruction and Streetscape Project update. And we have Jill Stephen here to answer questions. Let me first check to see if there are any questions. Councillor Chisholm.
You can wait till after
The slider won't open. Slider won't open. Yeah. No, I'll get it later, yeah.
hold on. Councilor Elgar, I think your mic is on. Is he off now? Okay. No, mine's more of a question. Can it wait till after the presentation, or would you like to have it proceed right now?
Well, let's see if you want a we're testing to see if you want a presentation.
Personally, I don't see any need to have the presentation. I think the report's self-explanatory.
Then ask your question.
My question is, one, it's more of a statement. Looking at the report, the only minor thing that has to be looked at, is included in the report, is that some of the trees in the northwest corner of Navy and Lakeshore have died, and they need to be replaced. And I didn't see that anywhere in the report, unless I missed it, but that needs to be considered, replacement of those trees.
They will be.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I had a question regarding the community loading zones that will be put in place with the loss of the middle lane. It's going to take a little while and some education. I was just wondering if we could have a brief update on when that will be occurring.
Ms. Stephen, when will we be educating delivery trucks on their new routine?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, some of the work that's underway right now started today with the grinding phase is the resurfacing of the side streets in phase 1. When that work is complete and we've resurfaced those roads, we'll be able to move on to the line painting and the installation of the signage for the for parking and for the commercial loading zones. And I think at that point it would be appropriate to work on that education for the users of those commercial loading zones, as well as the users of parking in the area, to differentiate between parking and commercial loading.
All right. Thank you very much, Jill. Another question. It was great when we were able to open between Allen and Reynolds in advance of the rest of Lakeshore. Will we be able to do something similar between Reynolds and Trafalgar? I realize that the Trafalgar Road north-south is going to be under construction for many weeks yet, but could we open the east-west to traffic?
Sorry, through you, Mayor Burton. We will be moving forward with paving that section between Reynolds and Trafalgar in the next few weeks. The granular road base is in, and we're just finishing that up now. Once that's in, once the base is in, we will pave. The intention is to leave that closed to traffic for the time being. We need to do the line marking, do the work also on Trafalgar to we're working on the traffic signals there as well. So we will have that closed to traffic for a few more weeks yet. But once we are able to direct traffic over to Dunn, we can be looking at opening that up now, at that point, sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Through you, Mayor Burton. Director Stephen, can you just confirm that the installation of the PXO at Reynolds and Lakeshore, when it will be activated, will it be activated upon installation or will it wait until later in November?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we'll wait to activate that until the road is open to vehicles at Reynolds and Lakeshore.
Okay. And thank you for that. And my other question is, while we're resurfacing some of these side streets, will we be getting to resurface the area just east of Allen and put markings in to remove that right-hand lane turning marking, because it does confuse people and a couple people drive over the curb. Yeah. Will that be in the next few weeks or at the end of the project?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, that work will be in the next couple of weeks. We will be resurfacing from Allen over to Watson.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. A mover and seconder to receive the report. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, Councillor Giddings. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion carries. We now come to the Oakville Enterprises Corporation quarterly update, the appointment of director and authorization request. And we have a presentation from Rob Lister, the CEO, and we will also have other members of the team from Oakville Enterprises available for any questions. Madam Clerk, can you bring Mr. Lister into the Zoom focus here?
I'm here.
All right, away you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present an update from OEC and Oakville Hydro. With me today online are David Brennan, Chair of Oakville Enterprises, and Sean McCoggan, Chief Operating Officer of Energy and Infrastructure. Next slide, please. Today, I'll be covering our response during the pandemic, some comparisons on electricity consumption, provide an update on our electricity distribution system reliability, an Ontario Energy Board regulated price plan update. I'll describe key capital projects across Oakville, highlight a unique innovation advancement, and end with a summary of employee community involvement. So next slide, please. At the start of the pandemic, as always, we put safety first for employees and community. OEC created a pandemic task force comprised of individuals focused on specific business aspects to help shape the organization's pandemic response. And since March, employees and systems have demonstrated resiliency and versatility, working safely to meet customers' changing needs. As the government shifted and adjusted to keep the pandemic at bay, our employees ensured a seamless transition throughout the phases to support customers by providing all services. Throughout it all, the organization has fared the economic impact of the pandemic and has seen consistent energy use across Oakville compared to prior years. Next slide, please. Electricity consumption. On the slide, you see the 2019 consumption in blue and the 2020 in red. In spite of the pandemic, electricity consumption in Oakville is very similar to 2019, and week to week has essentially followed the same pattern, heavily driven by temperature. We did not see the load growth we were expecting from the addition of new customers. However, the consumption did not drop. Early on, our 10 largest customers, they did have drops in load, but they have since recovered and are back to normal consumption patterns. Next slide, please. Reliability. Oakville Hydro's distribution system continues to perform well. Proactive inspection, replacement of aged assets, replaced with automated features where possible, enhances grid automation. We did have a significant storm on July 19th, which caused problems on Kerr Street, the Fulgerwood area, and on Wolfdale Avenue. Lightning damaged a pole on Wolfdale and ran through a manhole at Spears and Kerr, causing extended outages. Damage from this storm prevented us from minimizing another outage on Kerr Street on August 11th that was caused by high electricity loads. Overall, though, the system is performing well this year. Next slide, please. The regulated price plan. Currently, most residential and small business customers in Ontario are billed at time of use rates under the Ontario Energy Board's regulated price plan. Beginning October 13th, customers on time of use rates will have the flexibility to opt out of time of use pricing and be charged based on a two-tier pricing structure. The first changes will take effect on November 1st. Both the Ontario Energy Board and Oakville Hydro will have a tool for customers to help decide which pricing structure will be best for them. I do expect the new rates for both systems to be announced in mid-October. Next slide, please. Capital projects. Several capital projects have been underway to enhance reliability throughout Oakville. Currently, there are 5 major projects underway across the town. The Marlborough Court underground rebuild in Ward 5 is expected to be completed at the end of January 2021. The first phase of our underground rebuild is completed in the Riverview Street and Chalmers Street area, Ward 1, and the second phase of the project is underway and is expected to be completed in mid-November. The overhead rebuild of the pole line on Rebecca Street from Sunset Drive to 3rd Line in Ward 1 is expected to be completed at the end of September. An overhead rebuild of the pole line in the Seabrook, Saxon, Swan, and Seton area has just recently commenced in Ward 1 and is expected to be completed by the end of 2020. And lastly, the underground conversion of the overhead wire railway crossing at Bronte Road in Ward 1 will be completed by the end of September, with overhead removals expected by the end of November. Next slide, please. Innovation to increase reliability. Recently, an innovative advancement between Oakville Hydro and Planview was highlighted by the Electricity Distributors Association Distributor magazine. This project is improving reliability, outage response times, and customer satisfaction in Oakville. Connecting our field staff with technology is an opportunity to troubleshoot interruptions through innovation. This intersection of asset inspection images, maps, and other utility data all into one platform drive new insights and better decision making. This innovation has led to optimizing the Oakville Hydro Capital Investment Program and creating new efficiencies. Next slide, please. Employee community involvement. Yesterday, several of our employees participated in the first ever virtual Terry Fox Run. Oakville Hydro employees and their families have had a strong presence at the Terry Fox Run for over 10 years. This year was no exception as we participated virtually. Employees enjoyed the competitive spirit and found unique ways to fundraise through virtual platforms. Throughout the year, our employees have continued to donate and fundraise for United Way. This is a charity that is embedded in our organization, and we're pleased to support its cause. Several employees also participated in the Enbridge virtual ride to cancer. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you for providing me the opportunity today, and I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel can lead off, and then Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a question, and it's come to me from residents who experienced the outage in and around Innisclare in Southeast Oakville this summer. And the question was, is there any thought to having a more real-time upload of the outages or updates to the timing of the outages in Oakville Hydro's system?
Well, the application that we do have is supposed to be almost real time. As soon as we are aware of an outage, we do post it on Oakville Outage's website, which is a portal to our main website, and that provides a map that shows the areas that are out. We have had occasion in which information has been delayed and hasn't been as accurate as we would like it to be, but the system is there, and our intent is to provide as updated information as we can. So if there are situations where that's not the case, I would be pleased to hear about it. I will definitely look into it.
Okay, so those are it wasn't up to date this summer when the outage occurred around Innisclare, and it went past the time it stated that they'd be reactivated, which I'm sure was really just a result of how complicated getting things fixed were. But the site didn't give, nor did the phone system it didn't feel as user-friendly as people who were, you know, hitting the 6+ hour of outage and getting worried about going into the night. So just as a point of feedback, that's why I was asked if that was on the project list.
I'll look into that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much. Thank you, CEO Lister. I had a number of questions from some residents about the cost of their hydro bills throughout this pandemic, and they were under the impression that the province had frozen rates because people are at home, but the bills were just astronomical, and I've got a lot of concerns about going forward with regards to time of use rates and frozen rates, and I know you touched on the rates coming out soon, but what maybe you can let us know what the province might be looking at, or what Oakville Hydro might be doing to acknowledge the use at home now in the times, and maybe telegraphing a little bit about where people's hydro costs are going to be going in the next 6 months or even longer as people are sort of locked at home using all their devices all day long.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what the Province of Ontario Energy Board will come out in terms of pricing. They don't let us know until a week or two before the actual date that they implement them. The government did hold the time of use rate at one rate. Now, what we found, though, is with a lot of people home, the load patterns have changed significantly, and the air conditioning load has really pushed up people's hydro bills over the summer due to the increased consumption. So that's the current circumstance, but I do not have insight into what the province will set in terms of rates going forward.
And so did you, I mean, have we been monitoring time of use rates? I mean, at Oakville Hydro, did we see those kind of all went out the door since last March, or did we still see peak times? Or I mean, what was the trend here that Oakville residents were they trying to use off-peak times or not? Was it a free-for-all over the past 6 months?
There was a notable greater consumption during the daytime, where typically houses would be turning down their air conditioner during the day. The air conditioners were running over the course of the day, and so there was increased consumption during the day. And there was a little bit of a load shift. In the morning, it was delayed a little bit, but significantly more consumption during the days. The price they set until October 31st for the time of use was a flat 12.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So they veered away from the three-tier system over the course of the pandemic, and then come on November 1st, they'll have the three-tier back in place, but the customers will have the option for a two-tier, like so much on your first 1,000 kilowatt hours, and then anything over 1,000 kilowatt hours will be at a different rate.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lister.
Thank you. Councillor Dudek?
Thank you, through your worship. My questions were somewhat related to, similar to Councillor O'Meara. And I just want to use this opportunity to reinforce with members of the public, and I think you inferred that we do not control, Oakville Hydro does not control the rates. It's the province that controls the rates. So though the billing comes from Oakville Hydro, it is not Oakville Hydro who is responsible for that 12-cent or, the amount, because some people sort of said, well, wait a minute, it's higher than what I would have been paying, and you've capped it at this. So there was not even any kind of buffer. It was almost higher than anything they would have experienced otherwise. So it was kind of a wake-up call. People were talking about getting lottery tickets to pay their hydro. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek, for making a very valuable point that it's a pass-through. The money all goes to the province. I have, Mr. Lister, did you have something to add?
I did, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I just want to mention that the distribution rate that Oakville Hydro charges for residential customers is not related to consumption, and it's less than $30 a month. So our monthly that we charge is fixed and it's irrespective of actual consumption. And the rest comes from the variable rate that the government has put in place, as Councillor Dudek explained.
That's right. To put a finer point on it, no matter how much money you send to the province, we don't get more. So I have two more councillors indicating questions, Councillor Lischina and then Councillor Adams.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Lister. Just a quick question. I don't know if you have any other information regarding the time of use, the opt-out option. Is there any ability to opt back in if it's not working for residents? Do you have any more details on that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the residents will have the opportunity to opt in and opt out. I'm not sure how often you can do that in a particular time period, but my understanding is there won't be restrictions such that if you decide to want to go back, you can go back and then back again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation once again. I very much appreciated that you highlighted some of the capital renewal projects in your presentation today. I want to thank you for that. And then I wanted to ask if you would, in the future, the next time you're back to see us, if you would present some of the OEC group of companies and what they do and how they're important to both the corporation as well as the town of Oakville. I believe from my interactions with many residents that they don't fully appreciate all the many things that OEC does and how it fits into all of our strategic planning and the important work that we do both at Oakville Hydro, but as well as through the town of Oakville. So if you wouldn't mind taking that back and thinking about how we could try to get a little bit of that word out to the community, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, Councillor Adams, I will do that for sure.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no other questions, is there a mover and seconder for the motion, the three-part motion in the agenda? Councillor Lischina and Councillor Dudek, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody. The next
Thank you.
Next item is the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation Annual General Meeting and Business Update, the appointment of auditors, and the appointment of directors and chair. And we have a report, you have a report, I mean, and Mark Maneri, the President and CEO, is here for your questions or to present, whichever is your pleasure. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if the presentation includes anything other than what's in the report. I was hoping to find out if the presentation had any further strategic directions within it for our consideration.
Mr. Maneri, you have the Zoom, as Michael Bloomberg said in a Zoom meeting I was in yesterday. You have the Zoom. That's instead of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the councillor's question, the presentation does include a snapshot of the activities of the board over the course of the past year and what our go-forward plan is for the next year, our current activities. In terms of strategic direction, the strategic direction has been set by the board with the completion of the governance framework, and that was really the thrust of the presentation today, was to tell you that the governance framework exercise has now been completed, and we can move forward to aggressively market the surplus town holdings, albeit waiting for a final shareholder declaration. If there's something specifically that the councillor is looking for, I'd be happy.
And perhaps I'd like to see the presentation, please, Your Worship.
So this is the title page for the presentation. If we move to the next slide, which is slide 2, you can see the board's objectives for the past year. The focus primarily being on the final governance model for the Oakville MDC and making ready for market those lands defined in the 5-year business plan as immediate priority sites. If we move to the next slide, I should also mention, if I could, I've framed this presentation more as a reference document or a takeaway. There's a lot more detail in here that I necessarily plan to talk about today, because you can read it as well as I can speak it. But there are a few things that I did want to highlight for you. If we move to slide 3, that's our brag slide. The reason I put this in here is that with the governance policy work being done, I think you've now got a model for other municipalities to follow. We've undertaken a wide search of best practices, policies that are suitable for this organization. And I think other municipalities will be looking to Oakville and benefit from what it has done. And in fact, I have been contacted by the other municipalities to see what we have done, and I think that's a real recognition of the work that the board's done in the last year and a half or so. Moving to the next slides. Slides 4, 5, and 6 really talk about the board's deliverable this past year in the effort to meet the shareholder interim declaration and the requirements that were imposed by you as the shareholder. As I've listed in 4, 5, and 6, these are the major pieces, policy work and administrative practices that have been put in place by the board in the last year to achieve that result. If we could move to directly to slides 7, 8, 9. Sorry. I also wanted to just remind you of the work that had already been done by the board to build on what was done this past year, so that you can see that it actually is a complete package, and that the complete governance model for the Oakville MDC has now been achieved. The major point to make in all of this is that with the completion of the governance exercise, we're now able to move to a final shareholder declaration, which is a major milestone for the shareholder and for the Oakville MDC. And if we move to slide 10, as council will recall, the interim shareholder declaration placed a restriction on the Oakville MDC's ability to take transactional related development activity until certain plans and policies were in place, the governance exercise. As such, the final shareholder declaration is a key target for the Oakville MDC. Why is it so important? Because when the final shareholder declaration is passed, it removes this restriction and allows the Oakville MDC to begin to market the town's lands aggressively and to get out there and fulfill the mandate that you created us for. Okay. Moving to the next slide. Having said that, you will recall that last year we did come to the board and say, could we please have the opportunity, the board came to the council and said, could we please have the opportunity, notwithstanding that the governance exercise isn't complete, to begin developing 2 specific properties, being Parcel 7 at the former Public Works site and the former Brentwood School building. Town Council did approve that request, and in advance of the adoption of the final shareholder declaration, and we have been moving aggressively in terms of the disposition of both Parcel 7 and the Brentwood School. Moving to slide 13. This provides an update on the status, as it says, of 2264 Trafalgar Road, which is the Parcel 7 at the corner of Glen Ashton and Trafalgar Road. The parcel actually went to market on August 10th through the Brokers Board, Cushman Wakefield. And I can tell you that there's huge interest in this property, significant interest. So I think the deal is going to be made here. Assuming that an acceptable offer is received, the transaction will be brought to Town Council for completion. And I anticipate that will happen sometime in October or November of this year. I do point out that although we had originally had the intention of moving forward with the sale in March of this year with the public health situation, the market was just not right to do so, which is why there was a delay in bringing this forward. But I can tell you that since we have been out there, as I said, there has been a huge interest in purchasing this property. As slide 14 points out, If a sale of parcel 7 is successful, the remainder of the public works site will be taken to market later this year in the fourth quarter through an expressions of interest process. Caveat, of course, being that the final shareholder declaration is in place that allows us to do that. And in talking to town staff, we believe that that can be brought to council in due course. Slide 15 and 16 just reiterate to council that although this is a cash transaction to generate immediate revenue, this is not the disposition plan for the rest of the town's holdings. In order to maximize the value of the land that the town has and to create a predictable and continuing revenue stream, we're going to be pursuing partnerships, joint ventures, equity opportunities with the development industry wherever possible, because we believe that it's these kinds of commercial relationships that we would be able to ensure the highest return possible to the shareholder. Straight cash sales are great. You have immediate revenue. However, a long-term partnership and joint venture arrangement gives you skin in the game for years and revenue associated with that. Slides 17 and 18 speak specifically to our efforts to market the Brantwood School. And I apologize for my error. The address, I should know this so well, for Brantwood School is 221 Allen Street, not 211. But that's my typographical error, and I apologize for that. We've been actively seeking potential partners to undertake the redevelopment of the Brantwood School for a residential conversion since town council asked us to do that. And I can tell you that a number of parties have been engaged. As I say in the presentation, we've placed an emphasis on experienced developers who specialize in conversion and repurposing of heritage buildings. And that's a very niche development market. Although it has some concerns have been raised by developers in terms of the site, given its age, given some of the unknowns, the Oakville MDC remains optimistic that although we've not been successful thus far, we will find a partner. We have 2 individuals that remain seriously engaged, and I believe that we will be able to find a plan that works for the developer and the town in the relatively near future. Then moving straight to 19. That was really the thrust of the presentation. Certain shareholder approvals are being sought, as you saw in the report from the acting commissioner. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Maneri. Councillor Haslett-Deal, let me just see if Councillor Adams is done with his questions. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
I have no further questions. Thank you for the presentation. I'm ready to move the item if that's the desire.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take that. Councillor Haslett-Deal, then Councillor Grant.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Can you just tell us that on the Brantwood School site, have you had interest that wanted to combine the school with the 7 residential lots, or is the interest solely on conversion of the school building?
I would say that we have both. Some are specifically interested, have been specifically interested in the school, and some are specifically interested in a transaction that would involve the 7 lots. I'd say the emphasis is more on the 7 lots with the school, but there certainly have been others, and there remains one that is completely interested solely in the school.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I know that Councillor Noel and I both get a number of people asking about the old public works land, given that it's such a large property. Recently, when pointing something to the fact that the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation would be looking after it, I pointed to the website, which actually just turns out to be a front page and nothing else. I'm just wondering that now that we've got this work done, will we be populating the website with any information so the public can access this information, just in the interest of transparency?
That's an excellent point, Councillor. What we had determined, we're about 95% done on the website, and it is not live. You're absolutely right. Our thinking was that until we actually had projects that could go forward and our governance exercise was done, it was silly to put up a website that said coming soon. So now we are actively working to get that live, and I would expect that that will be the case within a matter of weeks.
Great, especially given that you look to be taking some action within the next month or so with the public works lands.
We're hoping it will dovetail.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Maneri. I just wanted to clarify, I know you had referenced the fact that any offers or proposals would be brought to council for approval, but I'm just curious what the actual process is. Does the MDC board actually adjudicate the proposals, the offers, etc., and bring a recommendation to board? How does that process work? How do you see that happening?
Councillor, that's absolutely correct. If there's an acceptable offer that comes in from the broker, it would be taken to the Oakville MDC board. The recommendation would come from the board to town council to finalize any transaction.
And what sort of supportive information would come with that recommendation to council in terms of market analysis or anything else in order for us to have a fulsome, package of information to make that decision?
What you would receive as part of the report is, again, just what you said, a market analysis, a review of the various offers that came in. One of the advantages of having a broker involved with this is not only using their resources to maximize the notoriety of the site and the value, but to provide us with that level of information that I know the shareholder will want when they have to make the decision as to whether or not this is an acceptable deal. So you will be receiving a fairly fulsome report at the time on this and other properties as we go forward.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the market analysis and the types of data that the brokers can provide, will there also be any sort of planning analysis that can help factor into the decision that will come with the package as well?
That wouldn't come from the Oakville MDC board, but I mean, I do liaise with town staff, and I'm certain that they would have a companion report, which would assist council in making the decision around the transaction.
I think that'd be incredibly useful. Thank you for that. Now, just a very quick housekeeping question. I noted that there is in the shareholders' resolutions, there is a request that requires unanimous consent of the shareholder, and since there's one, that's pretty easy, to waive the audit requirements. I'm assuming that's because there was no income in the past year?
Yes, financial statements were prepared, but because there were so few transactions, that it was felt by the corporate secretary and treasurer that it was unnecessary.
Okay. Will future financial statements be consolidated with the municipality, or will they be reported separately?
I think the treasurer would have to answer that. I mean, it would be my expectation that they would come separately once there is a revenue stream to the Oakville MDC, but I think the treasurer is in a better position to answer that.
Is the treasurer available, or can I just get that later by a memo or something?
I can ask the treasurer to provide you with that information.
That'd be fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Maneri.
Thank you very much, Council. We have a motion from Councillor Adams for the four-part resolution. Is there a seconder? Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection? Councillor Elgar, do you have a question?
I have a question. My question is regarding, does this tie in confidential appendix B to discussion item 7? We're approving both at this one, or are we waiting for the other? Because the two are so tied together.
I believe you would be approving all of it, like A and B.
A and B, B, which is the confidential appendix.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's good. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for the clarification. All right, Council, is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, I see no objection, and I declare it carried. And that brings us to item number 8, the July 31st, 2020 financial results and COVID-19 financial update. And we have a report from the just confirmed Commissioner of Corporate Services, Nancy Sully. And on behalf of all of Council, congratulations. If I can put it this way, you've earned it.
Oh, thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton, I do have a very brief presentation I could present, but just wanted to highlight a couple of items in the report. As you know, COVID has had an impact on 2020. We did bring our last report forward in July. At that time, we were projecting a net shortfall of about $10.3 million. Since that time, we've progressed a bit more through the year. A lot of the programs really hadn't started yet. When we brought that July report, it was based on April results. So now that we've gotten a little bit further along in the year and we've seen how things are coming back online, we have updated our projections. And while our revenue projections for shortfalls are a bit higher than what we were anticipating due to the slower return to full service, our expenses are more than mitigating that increase in the revenue shortfalls. So we are finding significant savings in our personnel. We did keep some positions vacant as we go through some of the service reviews, as we were focused on the pandemic, as well as all of the part-time staff that were unfortunately laid off. So we have had quite a bit of savings. That includes skills improvement, mileage, even in transit, things like fuel, the use of taxis, etc. So when we take that into consideration, we are now projecting a net shortfall of $6.4 million. We did get approval from Council to fund that shortfall from reserves or the 2019 surplus. But since bringing these reports forward, we have been told that we are receiving funding through the Safe Restart program, a total of about $6.9 million. We will be using most of the transit funding under the Safe Restart to fund or offset the shortfalls in transit. There would be a little bit of money left, depending on how the actual year-end results turn out, that would be available into next year. And we would be using the general Safe Restart Funds agreement to offset the other shortfalls. The amount of funding we received under the general funding is just under $4.5 million. At this time, we're anticipating using about $4 million to offset shortfalls this year, and the remainder would be available to offset any impacts into next year. There is a chart in the report that does show the update on the revenue projections and the expense reductions and how we come to that $6.4 million. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Council, questions about the good news? Or the less bad news, perhaps is a better way to describe it? Councillor Chisholm.
Rather not a question, but my thanks to the staff and to the leadership with respect to this report. Well laid out. I'm really happy in our process and where we're going based under the COVID dilemma that we're under. It looks good, but I guess the caution will be 2021 that we have to be considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. I think we can all echo that thought. Well put. Well, Council, is there a mover and seconder for the report then? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Robertson, thank you. Any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion carries. That brings us to the sign bylaw review of sign face area calculation. This is a report from the Municipal Enforcement Services. And the report, the recommendation from staff is that the report be received. That is, that we make no change. And should council wish to make the change, I have an alternative wording for you. I have an indication from Councillor Giddings that he has comments on or questions on this. Councillor Giddings, am I correct on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. I'd be happy to move acceptance of this at the appropriate time. My only question for staff was that whether the information or the concern that's expressed in this report, to make sure that that's included when this bylaw comes forward for review. Can I have that assurance?
Hi, through you, Mr. Worship. Yeah, we certainly can include that in any future review.
All right, that's
that was a yes.
Perfect.
Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Could we just clarify if somebody wants a larger sign face, which is beyond what the bylaw allows, what recourse do they have at this point?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. We currently have 3 different avenues for adjustments. The first would be an exception if the sign is 10% over in either sign face area or height. The second is an appeal process, which would see anything apart from that, with the exception of static electronic message boards or any prohibited signs. And then if it is either through a static electronic message board or a prohibited sign, it would be heard through an amendment process, and that would be through a report to council.
Thank you for clarifying that for the public.
All right, Councillor Giddings has moved receipt, which is to say not to change the sign bylaw. Councillor Haslett-Deal, are you seconding? Thank you. Councillor, is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion is carried and the matter is received. We now have a COVID-19 verbal update from the CAO. And we'll welcome to the podium Jane Closey, our CAO.
Mayor, members of council, I was just waiting for the presentation to come up on the screen for you. I was actually hoping I didn't need to do a presentation on COVID for you today, but with the recent changes in the numbers, we thought it was important to just update you on a few aspects or approaches that we are taking given the recent change in the numbers. I'll start with the typical information that I have on each presentation, just in showing to you the number of cases that we are experiencing globally in Canada, Ontario, Halton, and Oakville. You can see that the number of cases in the province recently has increased starting about the mid part of last week. We haven't seen these types of numbers since early June, which is of great concern to all of us. Specific to Oakville, Halton Public Health had reported 45 new cases of COVID in Oakville over the weekend. So we at our home are also experiencing those increases. I think that the last time we experienced those type of increases in Oakville was in early part of April. The Canada-U.S. border will remain closed now until October the 21st, so the travel limitations are still in place. There is a few positive notes. One is that the amount of testing that's happened throughout the province hit the highest level on Sunday with 40,000 test results or tests being undertaken, and the move to increase the availability of testing sites with partnerships with several of the pharmacies within Ontario. So with the amount of testing, that is going to, at least we can better understand where the outbreaks are and be able to follow up on them. So with the increasing numbers, as you're aware, the province had decreased the gathering limits last week for Toronto, Peel, and Ottawa. And on Saturday morning, they announced the same limits to be applicable province-wide. So we're now for events that are private events, that they are going to be limited to 10 people indoors and 25 people outdoors. This doesn't apply to organized events or events within licensed facilities such as restaurants or banquet halls and those types of things, or anything that's been permitted, such as in our recreation centers or in our parks. It really is aimed at private parties and private gatherings that have significantly contributed to the rise in the number of cases. In terms of our own parks, if there are some gatherings that happen, it will require a municipal enforcement and certainly the police on patrol in parks to increase their level of enforcement in those areas, given these change in the numbers from the 25 that can gather outdoors. So the public health messages have not changed. And although I'm sure all of us are very tired of this, it's been, well over 6 months now that we have been in this pandemic. We really can't relax what we're doing. These messages from public health still need to be applied, and we really need to continue with it, because this is certainly not over, and we really don't understand when this will be over. We are continuing with these messages on all their social media. We're looking at ways to renew the messages and get them out again, because certainly with the increase of numbers, these are the types of messages that people need to hear in terms of how to protect themselves, their community, and their family around them. So while most town services are up and available, you've seen over the last several weeks a gradual opening of all our facilities. We're pretty well up to most of the services. There are really just a few more that are left closed. So public access to some of our buildings are still restricted. Of course, recreation centers and libraries and where there is programming, those are available. They're all pre-booked, so it's not just a walk-in into those facilities, particularly our recreation facilities. We are looking at pre-booking, so we have the ability to trace people as they move through our facilities. The only administrative type buildings that are open is Service Oakville here at our front counter. People can come in and drop things off. Some of the permits are dropped off here, that type of thing. Tax inquiries, all of those things can happen just at the Service Oakville counter, but access through the rest of town hall is not permitted. The transit facility is available also for the split pass, so that's the only other type of administration function that we can do at a public building. So our central operations site, our North Depot, all of those facilities are closed to the public. The Oakville Centre for Performing Arts will remain closed. We're looking at the end of the year when we could consider whether or not how we move into 2021 for that facility. And Kinnock and Maple Grove Arenas, which are both standalone facilities, we will keep them closed in 2020, and we will look at those through the budget process into 2021. And of course, the White Oaks Pool, which is closely associated with the school, will also remain closed. So around town, we are looking at what we can do with the patios. I know most municipalities are considering how they can keep patios open well into the colder weather season. So we are working with our internal departments in terms of fire, understanding what the propane heaters on the sidewalks will require. How do we still maintain snow plowing, those types of things, so that we can offer a winter patio plan to the restaurants. It certainly has been a positive ability for the restaurants to be able to continue with throughout this pandemic, and the closing of them is going to be significant for them. The Police on Patrol Parks program that has been extremely helpful in terms of managing the congregation that we've had especially along the lakefront, will be coming to an end on the end of this week. And it's fortunate that if you look at the weather projection, it's very nice this week when they'll still be out there and active, but next week it begins to turn into 16, 17 degrees. So hopefully that will curtail people in the congregation in the lakefront areas. And with that program coming to end. It will then mean that municipal enforcement will still be there. We have some very limited parks ambassadors. That program is coming to an end as well. So it will be municipal enforcement that will ensure that the congregation limits are maintained within those areas. So in terms of town staffing, we have, the safety of our staff has remained a priority. As you know, we had done the playbook, which set out how we were protecting staff throughout this pandemic. It has been quite successful. We have had very few cases within staff and very few cases within our facilities. So we have been very lucky in that regard. And I can't emphasize enough the amount of effort that staff has taken in terms of providing their services to this town. They have gone above and beyond in all their efforts to ensure that we have remained safe, and yet they can still deliver as much of their services as possible. We still have 10 staff that are redeployed, and that's predominantly from the Performing Arts Center. So they've been redeployed into horticulture, forestry, and to support some of the customer service required at the community centers. We also had undertaken a pulse survey in about mid-July. We had very good, about 54% of staff, which is a very high rate, responded to the survey. It was all online. The engagement rate, which is a measure that they measure, is up around 84%, so it was very high. And really what it emphasized is that, as I had said earlier, the energy and passion that your staff put to doing their jobs for Oakville is extremely high, and they are very proud of the work that they contribute, and that's certainly evident in the survey results ratings that we had gotten back in. They are looking forward to some changes, though. A greater desire for some mental health support, particularly around the COVID issues. What are we doing with a remote working policy going forward? And also a recognition for the staff that have been on site doing their responsibilities throughout the entire pandemic. So we're working through the feedback that we've received from staff, and we'll be looking at some of those policy work that we need to do and some of the changes in order to move forward with some of the suggestions that we had received. In terms of going forward, we have prepared for the second wave. The EOC has been meeting throughout the time period to get updates on what's happening. We are also looking at increasing the amount of times we meet during a week. The EOC is now meeting 2 days a week in order so that we can get a better understanding of the changes in which things are moving forward. And the ECG, which is the Emergency Control Group that provides recommendations to the Recovery Committee, has started meeting on a weekly basis. The Recovery Committee will continue to meet as we need and as we're making changes, either legislatively or just changes in the level of service. The Economic Task Force has completed their work. Staff are continuing to work with the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce in order to look at what types of resiliency programs could be put in place in order to further support the business community. We're well positioned. We have looked at how we rolled out the services and how we could either roll the services back in a phased way, a more of a targeted way, or we could look at completely rolling them back depending on where the province goes with the next series of steps and where the pandemic goes. So we are well positioned to be able to undertake the same due diligence we had in the early days of the pandemic. So with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, CAO. Council, who wants to go first with questions? Councillor O'Meara, then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, CAO Closey. 2 questions. First of all, have we been approached by either the school board or the province with regards to space if they want to spread kids out, or if things go from bad to worse about housing kids in community centers or libraries or other areas? Has that conversation been had, or have we been asked?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have not been asked but from the school boards. They have indicated they don't need any space right now for the schools, so that request hasn't come. There are some changes they're making to their property in terms of access to the kiss and ride and the parking area, which we will be having discussions with them on that just because of the impact on the street itself. In terms of the hospital and, for example, testing sites, there has been some preliminary discussions on what we could offer for testing sites, not only for the testing for coronas or COVID, but also increasing the availability for vaccinations with the flu season coming up. So those discussions have started.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Adams.
My question goes to the bylaw enforcement in terms of private gatherings. When I've read reports that police do not want to go to houses because of the safety factor and people are having parties, how much have we worked with our bylaw in terms of safety protocol and PPE when they do approach a house?
So municipal enforcement has been working quite closely with the police, and I think as the limits and the fines have increased, the role of the police is something that's going to be important as we move forward in conjunction with municipal enforcement. So it is the two-pronged approach that's going to be key to those types of gatherings that are there. We are looking at what additional training and support we can provide to municipal enforcement officers so they're able to deal with those things much more effectively. We also have looked at how we can supplement some of those resources from others within the town who have that type of training. So those are the measures we've put in place, but very much so the police have a role within this, particularly with the fines that have been increased with the new legislation.
Thank you so much.
All right, Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I just had a follow-up question on the question around schools. Are we aware of any school capital projects that are designed, renovations to improve school HVAC systems or other things like that that are coming forward? And is there anything that the town can do to make those projects move through the system faster?
Oh, I'm not aware of any. But certainly, as we had at the very early on with the pandemic, we had given a high priority to health type of facilities. We can certainly look at that in our building department for giving a higher priority to schools who are making improvements that would make the building more safe for COVID.
Or if there's an expansion project that's coming forward that would support smaller class sizes.
Certainly, we can look at prioritizing them through our building services.
Thank you.
Perhaps the bad news in that answer is there hasn't been any yet.
Yeah.
Councillor Lischenna.
I noticed that answer.
Councillor Lischenna.
Your Worship, I think Councillor Longo had his hand up prior to me, so I will.
I saw you first. He's a patient man. Go ahead, you have the Zoom.
Okay, so just the follow-up. Thank you, Jane, for the presentation. Do you anticipate any redeployment of bylaw staff from other things like road parking and other things to actually checking on potential parties and that kind of thing?
We have identified staff that we could redeploy into municipal enforcement, which we'll do in a phased way. So it takes a particular training to be able to perform as a municipal enforcement officer. So we have staff identified within the town that is capable of doing that. And that's the staff we'd redeploy into municipal enforcement in order to supplement their resources.
And just for residents, is it like the same thing as before? The best thing to do is to call into Service Oakville if they are observing anything out of or that shouldn't be happening?
Yes, I do understand that the hotline at the police is also in place, so that is another place that they could phone into as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jane, just a quick comment about testing. So I think as more and more cases start coming about and people, especially school boards, and the direction being given, I think, is there a possibility to clarify the role of public health, the town of Oakville, Halton Region, the hospitals, just to give a bit more kind of education to the public as to what role does the town have versus public health versus the Halton region, turnaround times, because we're hearing from residents saying, why is it I go to Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital and I can get, it takes me 5 days to get results versus going to Hamilton or Mississauga. I think if we could maybe clarify the role of the town versus, those other agencies to kind of demystify the process in which testing happens and the expectations of turnaround times and, what the province is kind of doing, just to kind of take a bit of pressure off people feeling that the town isn't doing something when in reality, it is relatively complicated, but there are, proper resources to contact and talk through, just to kind of help continue to educate residents because the numbers are beginning to spike. And I think there's going to be more and more pressure on the testing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly look at the website in order to provide that. I know early on we had to really we did make a distinction between what public health did and what the town did. But I think you're right. There are many players in this, the province, the hospital, the region, ourselves, as well as others. So we'll look at the website to see if there's a way to clarify the roles on that as well, because we've had a number of questions ourselves about the testing and what the town should be doing. So that is a good point, and we'll look at the website for that.
And then just the last question, have we, through our own facilities, so through the rec centers and, seeing 60 Mile Creek with the blades and Skate Canada, has the contact testing or contact tracing been helpful and useful to determine if it's our facilities being areas where there may be outbreaks? So again, a lot of the safety that's been measures that have been put in by the town, I think are being effective, but it's just, have you seen anything other than 60 Mile Creek? I think the arena, we haven't really seen anything within our own facilities that have led to any outbreaks. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, and the outbreaks that we have had have come from other activities that have happened that have brought that, then they've attended our facilities. Right. So the protocols we have in place are excellent. The protocols I would say that the sports groups have in place are also excellent. And then the tracing that the public health does in terms of tracing the background have all been very effective in knowing very quickly what's happened. At all of our facilities, we do try and isolate the groups that are in particular areas so that it's quite easy to be able to identify a group that then we need to notify and put some protocols around rather than an impact throughout the facility.
Yeah, so I just want to, just last thing is just to thank the town staff for the efforts they're making, because I know it's way above and beyond what normally would be happening. So I just wanted to thank them for the extra work and the importance of that work to be able to trace and protect the residents and the other users of those facilities. So thank you.
I would like to emphasize, if I can, for a minute, this is where the roles and responsibilities are important. It is public health that does the tracing. We rely on them to do that. So we follow them in terms of that piece. Our portion is to make sure we've got facilities that are appropriately protected in terms of all the protocols we need to put in place.
Yeah, so just kind of reinforcing, I guess, those roles, those responsibilities for residents might be really helpful in kind of the testing, but then also the contact tracing and who does what, where, when. I think will help alleviate some of the confusion that's out there, and then make people more aware so they can actually kind of navigate through these challenging times. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Yes, if each one of us, it's really a simple two-step. Public health does tracing, the hospital does testing, until and unless Health Canada approves the saliva strip test, so that the Premier said today, so that he can put testing into the pharmacies the way the flu vaccine got put into the pharmacies, which greatly increased the ability and the numbers of people getting the flu vaccine. So our own hospital operates, unfortunately, under some limitations that are keeping it from being able to do as much testing as they might like. So we have to hope for the saliva test and the pharmacies to join the battle. And I'm told the saliva test is less painful than the swab in the nose, so there's a little tiny bit of good news there. Can I have a mover and seconder receive the CAO's report, please? Councillor Longo, Councillor Grant, thank you. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion's carried. Council, we now have the confidential discussion item C2, and it's possible that you could vote in public to receive the report and direct staff to do option 3, which is the recommended option. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to go in camera so that we might discuss the issue.
All right, then let me just see if we can't complete all other public business before we do that. We'll go into camera for your item and Councillor Elgar's item. Is that satisfactory? All right. So C2 goes over here. This is done. All right. We have a notice of motion for next time regarding site plan for 3194 Shoreline Drive, moved by Councillor Robertson and seconded by Councillor O'Meara, to bring the site plan approval to council. There's no need to vote on this. It's a notice of motion. The two councillors have a perfect right to bring it. And Councillor Robertson and Councillor O'Meara, thank you. The next one is a notice of motion by Councillor Adams and Councillor Lischina, also for next time, asking for a crackdown on noise-making cars and motorcycles. And before I say anything more about it, let me recognize the councillor with his hand up, Councillor Adams.
Your Worship, I wondered if council might consider waiving the procedure and allowing this to be considered this evening, as we're asking the province to move more quickly on bringing forward the appropriate regulations under the Highway Traffic Act, and waiting an extra month delays our ability to ask them to do that.
Well, I would certainly second it if I wasn't chairing. It looks like Councillor Dudek is going to second it for you. So the motion,
thank you.
The motion from Councillor Adams and Councillor Dudek is to waive the procedure bylaw to allow the introduction of the notice of motion now. Out of courtesy, let me ask if Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Robertson would like to be included in this. Or would you like to wait for your motion? Councillor Robertson, I guess it's your motion.
I'm fine with ours as it stands.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any objection to waiving the procedure bylaw as described? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and the motion to waive carries. Councillor Adams and Councillor Lischina, would you like to speak to your motion? And then we'll put it to a vote.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to read the motion. It is already printed in the addendum for members of the public who might be interested in seeing specifically what it is. But the ask is to the province to help us clamp down on noisemaker vehicles. Those are vehicles where mufflers have been changed and emissions control systems have been changed, all in the name of making a vehicle basically really, really, really loud. And I certainly, and I know pretty much every member of council has heard from constituents about the very loud vehicles over the summer months as everyone's been home waiting out COVID, and how annoying those vehicles are. I know Councillor Grant specifically wanted to have a piece of this, and so I wanted to thank him for helping to push this forward as well. These noisemaker vehicles have been the target of our very fine Halton Regional Police Services noisemaker project over the summer months. They've caught just piles and piles of these vehicles. They even broke up a car club that was using our property illegally to host noisemaker vehicles, basically. And you might have heard of another one out to the west of us that was broken up over the weekend as well. This is a change to the Highway Traffic Act that would help the police crack down on people who are making the changes to the vehicles. And so we're asking that the town of Oakville immediately call on the province to request that the Section 75(1) of the Highway Traffic Act be proclaimed and brought into force immediately. And I thank everybody for their support.
Thank you. Councillor Lischina, would you like to say anything? Thank you. So the good news here is that the province has already passed the necessary legislation, but has failed to proclaim it. So it's not like we're asking the legislature to do a big deal. We're just asking the government to carry through with what it already said it was going to do. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Duddick is next, and then Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the mover and seconder of the motion, just want to commend you for bringing this forward. Councillor Chisholm and myself have been working for easily the last 4 or 5 years. Started with motorcycles along Lakeshore, and they thought it was related to one establishment that seemed to be the reason why people were congregating in that. But as you pointed out, it's farther than just motorcycles, it's cars. It's everything from, not having a muffler when they should have had a muffler. And I just want to add my voice to thank the Halton Regional Police for all their work. They've really done an outstanding job, and it's a delight to tune into the social media and see what the newest, offenders have done and how they've been able to make a positive statement on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to the mover, if he might know this. Are they looking in the regulations at making it illegal for auto mechanics to remove them or to put second off-market mufflers on, or is it just if the driver gets caught with it? Is that do you know if it's the former?
The answer is yes. The new section includes making changes.
Okay. I spoke to a few mechanics in town about this, and they said if they want it and they pay, it doesn't matter to me. It makes no sense. It leaves my garage. I get paid. It's up to them what happens with it. And I've always found that to be very disheartening, to say the least. So thank you for that clarification.
My understanding is that it moves us in that direction. Yeah.
We always have to wait and see what happens with regulations. I'll just caution everybody from long experience. Next is Councillor Grant, and then Councillor Chisholm.
I just wanted to point out, we're talking about following people on Twitter who've been pushing this. I'd like to thank Constable Terrasso for his conversations with me and his work on Twitter to make this well known. Certainly in speaking with him about some of the issues, he's pointed a few of us in the direction of the bylaw from Mississauga that we're trying to base this on. So certainly I would encourage everybody to follow Constable Terrasso on Twitter. Just take a look for him.
Yes, and when he's around, don't be making any mistakes with your phone in the car. Councillor Chisholm, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. This has been an ongoing, as Councillor Duddick has indicated, for many years in the downtown area. We've worked with bylaw enforcement and the police, and we've put up signs with respect to the noise, reduction of noise. However, as you know, the more signs you put up, unfortunately, people don't see them, they don't read them, and it continues on. I guess the real question, and I direct this to Councillor Adams, with respect to the Highway Traffic Act, is there action to go to the source where the aftermarket equipment is being made and distributed through the retail? I don't really believe it's the mechanics and so forth. I think it's at the source of these aftermarket products. Is with
yes.
The government.
So the new section 75.1 includes offenses relating to tampering or sale of tampering devices. So it makes it a convictable offense to tamper with or to sell tampered devices, basically devices that are intended to make noise.
but my question, that doesn't seem to, the word tamper, what you can do, Councillor Adams, you can buy these units, not tampered, it's just taking off the originals and putting on the what do you call it, aftermarket. It's not tampering. My concern is really with the resources at source. Is what the concern is, because they're selling these things. They're not being tampered. They're just being replaced.
Well, it includes such wording as no person shall tamper or cause or permit a person to tamper by removing, bypassing, defeating, or rendering inoperative all or part of a motor vehicle's emission control system, or modifying a motor or motor vehicle in any way that results in an increased emissions from the level at which it was originally designed or certified by the manufacturer of the motor or motor vehicle. So it's going after the concept of you buy a vehicle with a muffler on it and you rip it out and do something else.
Thank you.
All righty then. It sounds like everybody's satisfied. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion is carried unanimously. I'm not aware of any regional reports or questions regarding town boards and advisory committees. This is your chance to correct me. There are 2 requests for reports, which we do have to vote on. One is a report requested by Councillor Chisholm, seconded by Councillor Dudek, that staff report back by the end of the first quarter 2021 on the rationale regarding the fishing restrictions in the inner harbors, piers, and waterfront parks in Oakville, and include possible revisions to those restrictions. There are no debate or questions required in this. I'll just ask if there's any objection to this request for report. Madam Clerk, there's no objection and the request is approved. The next request for report is moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Lischina, that staff report on options to enhance our noise bylaw to better protect Oakville residents from nuisance noise associated with modified vehicles, such as those with modified mufflers or emission control systems, including a review of recent work by the City of Mississauga as part of our 2021 noise bylaw review. Is there any objection to this request for a report? Madam Clerk, there's no objection and that report is approved. So I will now ask for a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws, and then we'll go into camera for these 2 matters. Can I have a mover, Councillor Lischina, a seconder?
We don't want to confirm the bylaw.
Except for the confirmatory bylaw. I need a seconder. Oh, Councillor Longo, thank you very much. All right, any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. All bylaws except the confirmatory bylaw are passed, confirmed. And now we need a motion for council to retire to a session closed to the public to deal with 2 things, item C2 and item 1, Appendix A, dealing with matters related to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality and litigation or potential litigation. And Councillor Dudek is moving and Councillor Chisholm is seconding. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion carries. And now we can say goodbye to the public because we've done all the public business in public. We don't need to come back, and we can Councilor, you could take a little bio break if you want while we get the technology set up to have the in-camera meeting. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Mayor Burton, because we're not going to do new business of a congratulatory nature, is it possible, and we're not coming back to the public, is it possible to do mine now?
Certainly. Please do.
Okay. I didn't want to let the week go by without thanking council for their attendance at the soft opening of the Oakville Trafalgar Community Center on Saturday. OTCC, as now it will be famously called, was the result of a great community collaboration led by 11 residents associations who championed the principle of fair geographic distribution of community services. But we all know to bring a project of this magnitude requires all of your support. Your unanimous vote for the project demonstrated your commitment to community consultation and community building. I also want to extend a special thanks to Councillor Giddings and Mayor Burton for their leadership as the coalition worked to achieve the vision and bring it to life. OTCC is environmentally progressive. It offers amenities that will support active living, health and wellness, and most importantly, community connections. I also want to extend our thanks to the town staff who took great care to design and deliver an amazing facility that recognized both town and neighborhood needs, such as the therapeutic pool, a 12-foot deep pool for the synchro team, a great indoor walking track, lots of pickleball and basketball courts, community meeting rooms, and a park with over 3,000 native species. Many of the coalition members had an opportunity to tour the facility this weekend, and we received great reviews. So on behalf of the many residents who will benefit from the community center, please know our hearts are full of gratitude, and it will be used for generations to come.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hazlett-Thiel. I want to extend an invitation to all residents of the town to feel welcome and free in all town facilities wherever your needs or your interests may lead you. Each of our facilities has a slightly different suite of services, and we're sure that with these now 6 rec centers, surely there will be one for you. So, and I thank you to the public and everyone for the strong support that was shown for years to make this happen. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just add to Councillor Hazlett-Thiel, we've toured the facility with a number of residents and members of our executives. The grounds are first class. The staff are incredibly energized and excited. As soon as the construction fences came down, the children from across Oakville have found it. And to see the smiles on their faces and their parents' faces is great to see. We'd also like to thank the local community who spent a year amidst a demolition site with everything that entailed. It was an incredibly long and at times painful process. And then living through the construction. It's a sight to see, and we'd like to thank everybody who embraced the project and supported the vision of the center. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. All right, Councillor O'Meara.
My apologies, Your Worship, but while we're doing congratulatory notices, just on behalf of the Terry Fox Committee as well, I want to thank all of my council colleagues who were out yesterday and all the residents in Oakville in unprecedented times, still showing their support for the 40th anniversary of the Marathon of Hope. And the committee, led again by MP Pam Demoff, they were pulling all the stops to try and raise as much funds as possible. And from what I hear, there's still going to be close to $125,000 raised this year without a race. So it's a fantastic thing. And I know a bunch of families were out walking around yesterday and doing a great thing. So kudos to everyone in Oakville for sticking with it and for celebrating what was 40 years of a remarkable effort by a young man that still continues to guide us all in Oakville here and across Canada. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara, and congratulations to Oakville for living up to its image of itself with this. That's very well done. All right, we are now going to have our little recess while the staff arrange for the in-camera meeting that we've already approved. So I'm going to say it's 8:10. Please be back in 10 minutes. All right? Thank you. All right, Council has met in a session closed to the public for purposes allowed under the Municipal Act and our procedure bylaw to consider matters dealing with a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality and litigation or potential litigation. And with respect to items 1, Appendix A, and item C2. in that session, council issued a staff direction for staff to paint the three arms of each light fixture in the park over the walkway lighting a matte black, which was a recommendation by staff. And this is concerning the Walker Street pathway lighting that has much occupied council. And I believe that completes all our work except for the final confirmatory bylaw. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Knoll and Councillor Lischina, thank you very much. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection to the confirmatory bylaw, and it carries. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. It's been terrific working with you, and we are adjourned.